Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The sun was rising over the Capitol, casting a golden light on the imposing facades of the legislative building. Marcus Jefferson, a respected state senator, adjusted his tie in the mirror of his black limousine. At 42, he had risen through the ranks of politics with integrity, determination, and a deep sense of justice. His career had always been marked by his commitment to his community, and he had become a symbol of hope for those who still believed in equality. That morning, Marcus was heading to a crucial meeting on criminal justice reform. His aides were accompanying him, preparing documents and notes for the debate. But as he approached the courthouse entrance, a familiar figure in a blue police uniform caught his eye: Officer Ryan Callahan. Callahan, a young white officer, was known for his arrogance and contempt for black citizens. Marcus sensed a tension in the air. For no apparent reason, Callahan walked up to the limousine, eyeing Marcus suspiciously. "Get out of your car, sir. I need to check your ID," he ordered in a sharp, authoritative tone. Marcus, surprised, calmly flashed his badges and explained that he was a senator. But the agent, unaware of his status, continued to challenge him in front of passers-by and reporters who were beginning to film the scene. What was supposed to be a simple commute to work quickly turned into a public humiliation. Callahan's veiled insults and contemptuous stares were a display of power, a cruel reminder of the barriers Marcus and so many others in his community still faced. In that tense moment, Marcus took a deep breath. He knew that what was unfolding before him was not just a personal confrontation, but a symbol of the fight against institutional racism. That day, his dignity would be tested, and he would understand that his strength lay not only in his political position, but in his ability to remain calm, dignified, and determined in the face of injustice. Destiny had knocked on his door, and Marcus Jefferson was ready to answer. Marcus Jefferson had barely stepped out of his limousine when Officer Ryan Callahan walked up to him, his gaze hard and his stance defiant. The morning air of the Capitol suddenly seemed heavy, charged with tension. Intrigued, passers-by slowed their pace to observe what was happening. "Sir, get out of your vehicle immediately. I need to verify your identity," Callahan ordered, his firm voice echoing across the Legislative Palace Square. Marcus raised his hands calmly and showed his senator's badge. "I am Senator Marcus Jefferson. I am on my way to an official meeting. I can show you all my papers if necessary," he said in a measured but authoritative tone. Callahan frowned. "It doesn't matter who you are. You look suspicious, and I'm doing my job." His tone conveyed obvious contempt, a condescension based solely on the color of Marcus's skin. Marcus felt a mixture of anger and desolation rising within him, but he forced himself to remain calm. He knew that giving in to anger would only make the situation worse. "Agent Callahan, I ask that you respect the law and my official status." "I am in no way a suspect," he replied, his voice firm but controlled. Agent Callahan snorted, a dry, contemptuous laugh that caught the attention of the first reporters present. "You think your title protects you? Here, everyone is equal before the law, even you," he said, his eyes narrowing. Without warning, Callahan leaned toward the limousine door and tried to pry it open to force Marcus out. Bystanders began filming with their phones. The already tense scene was taking on the air of a public scandal. Marcus, remaining calm, took a step back and raised his hands. "I assure you, officer, any attempt to abuse this authority will be reported." His piercing gaze never left Callahan's, challenging the officer's arrogance. But Callahan, ignoring all reason and authority, continued to provoke him. "Get down now, or I'll arrest you for obstruction." At that moment, Marcus understood that this was no longer a simple confrontation. It was a test of dignity and courage, a moment that would show how justice could be manipulated by those who abused their power. And before the crowd and the cameras, Marcus Jefferson was about to face a public humiliation that would mark the beginning of a struggle greater than himself. The crowd had grown around the limousine. Passers-by stood on the sidewalk, watching, some shocked, others curious, as their phones captured every moment of the scene. Journalists rushed over, quickly setting up their cameras and microphones to cover the incident. The morning sun shone on the square, but the air suddenly seemed heavier, as if charged with tension and injustice. Agent Ryan Callahan, his face contorted with arrogance, showed no sign of backing down. He pointed at Marcus, publicly challenging him. "You think your title puts you above the law? Here, everyone has to play by the rules. Even you, Senator." Marcus Jefferson took a deep breath. He knew that giving in to anger would only fuel the humiliation Callahan had orchestrated. "Agent Callahan, I am a public servant. My role is to uphold the law and represent my fellow citizens. I am not a criminal," he said calmly, his voice resonating with dignity despite the mounting humiliation. Callahan burst out into a dry, contemptuous laugh. "You sound like all those arrogant politicians. Do you think authority protects you? Get out of your car immediately, or I'll arrest you for obstruction." Bystanders began to whisper among themselves, shocked by the officer's behavior. Some defended Marcus, others remained silent, intimidated by Callahan's uniform and apparent power. Marcus, with almost superhuman patience, tried to reason with the officer one last time. "Officer, there is no legal reason to treat me this way. This public humiliation is not only unfair to me, but it also tarnishes the image of the police and our democracy." Callahan, visibly irritated by Marcus's restraint and calm, lifted the handcuffs and waved them in front of the crowd. "Get down, now," he ordered, his voice cold and authoritative. At that precise moment, the cameras captured Marcus's face, calm, dignified, but marked by suppressed anger. The crowd's murmurs turned into visible outrage. Witnesses began filming the scene live, posting on social media. The story of a black senator humiliated by a white police officer was beginning to spread like wildfire. Marcus knew that every second of this humiliation would be scrutinized by the entire country. He understood that what was at stake was more than his own dignity, it was about denouncing systemic racism and institutional injustice. And in this critical moment, he decided to remain firm, determined to transform this ordeal into a battle for justice and equality. The air was electric. The crowd, now densely packed around the black limousine, held its breath as Officer Ryan Callahan prepared to cross the final line. Marcus Jefferson, though calm, felt his heart pounding. Every moment of this confrontation was documented by cell phones, news cameras, and startled glances. "Get out immediately, or I won't have a choice," Callahan repeated, his tone authoritative and cold. Then, without waiting for an answer, he tried to force the door open. Marcus, still dignified, took a step back and raised his hands. "Officer, I ask you one last time, there is no legal basis for my arrest. I advise you to respect the law and my immunity," he said calmly, each word resonating with force and authority. But Callahan, blinded by his arrogance and contempt, ignored these words. "Enough," he shouted, taking out his handcuffs. The crowd's eyes widened as the officer brandished them in front of them. Marcus's aides rushed over, trying to reason with the officer. "Sir, look at his papers. He's a senator. You have no right to arrest him." Callahan shrugged. "Whatever your title is. You'll follow me now." In one swift motion, he grabbed Marcus by the arm and led him toward the nearby police vehicle. Marcus resisted with dignity, his gestures measured and his voice still calm. "You are committing a serious civil rights violation, officer. Every move is being filmed." Murmurs of outrage rippled through the crowd. Some citizens shouted protests, while others tried to call the media and higher-ups to denounce the abuse of power. Cameras, both professional and amateur, captured every second as the senator, calm but humiliated, was escorted to the police car. The spectacle didn't go unnoticed. Videos began circulating quickly on social media. "Senator arrested for no reason," some accounts headlined. "Public humiliation of a powerful black man," others denounced. The incident went viral within minutes, and Marcus's calm but dignified face stood in stark contrast to Callahan's arrogance. Inside the police vehicle, Marcus took a deep breath. Far from being discouraged, he understood that this wrongful arrest would become a symbol. Every camera, every glance, every comment on social media reinforced his conviction: this fight wasn't just about him, but about the fight against systemic racism and the abuse of power. And so began a battle that would go beyond personal humiliation, a struggle for justice, dignity, and equality, which the entire country would soon witness. No sooner had Marcus Jefferson been loaded into the police vehicle than unrest erupted within the legislative building. Fellow senators, shocked by the news, gathered in the main hall, phones and laptops in hand, following the viral broadcast of the arrest live. "This is impossible," exclaimed Senator Laura Hastings, one of Marcus's closest allies. "How can a police officer dare arrest a senator in the middle of the Capitol without legal justification?" Senate President John Whitmore immediately called an emergency meeting. He knew the situation could quickly escalate into a national political crisis. "We must secure his immediate release and hold this officer accountable. This cannot go unpunished," he declared, his face grave. Meanwhile, Marcus, sitting in the back of the police vehicle, remained calm. He knew that anger or agitation would only make his situation worse. He began mentally drafting a statement to publicly denounce the injustice he was suffering. Each word had to be precise, powerful, and dignified, to show the entire country that this humiliation was not just personal but symbolic of a larger problem. His aides, equally stunned, immediately contacted the Senate legal team. "We have to act quickly," explained Karen Lewis, his senior aide. "Witnesses are filming everything, and the media is already on the case. If we don't act, this could get out of hand." Meanwhile, outside, the crowd continued to gather, chanting Marcus's name and demanding his release. Journalists interviewed bystanders, broadcasting the scene on all channels. The first videos showed Marcus calm and dignified, facing Callahan's arrogance. Comments on social media multiplied, calling for justice and police reform. At the palace, the Senate passed an urgent resolution calling for Marcus's immediate release and the opening of an investigation into the agent involved. The senator's colleagues also wrote a letter to the Attorney General, demanding strict measures against any abuse of power. From the back of the police vehicle, Marcus watched the scene through the window. The crowd's shouts and the political unrest gave him a strange feeling. Despite the humiliation and injustice, he felt that change was possible. This moment, as painful as it was, would serve as a catalyst to denounce the abusive practices and systemic racism that so many Americans were victims of. Under his breath, Marcus whispered to his assistant, "Every injustice we suffer can become a lesson for the entire country. Stay calm and organized. We will turn this humiliation into strength." Thus, the arrest that seemed like a personal defeat already transformed into a broader political and social movement, heralding a fight that would go beyond the palace walls and touch the heart of the nation. No sooner had images of Marcus Jefferson's arrest circulated on social media than anger and outrage spread like wildfire throughout the city. Hashtags like #JusticeForMarcus and #StopRacismInPolice went viral within hours. Citizens, community leaders, and civil rights groups began organizing spontaneous rallies outside the State House and police stations. On the streets, placards and slogans expressed widespread outrage: "Stop the abuse of power," "Justice and dignity for all," and "A black senator does not deserve humiliation." The peaceful but determined protesters shouted Marcus's name, showing their solidarity and support. National and international media outlets picked up on the story. Television networks broadcast images of Marcus, calm and dignified, facing Officer Callahan, while social media relayed the outraged comments of thousands of internet users. Each video posted added increasing pressure on the authorities to act quickly. Inside the legislature, Marcus's colleagues were also mobilized. Emergency meetings were held, phones rang off the hook, and emails poured in from lawyers, journalists, and citizens expressing their support. The senators understood that the case could no longer be ignored. It affected not only Marcus, but the entire black community and the credibility of the police. Meanwhile, Marcus, still in the police vehicle, took note of every detail. Every testimony, every message of support, every shout from the crowd gave him the strength to remain calm and focused. "This is bigger than me," he thought. "The dignity of an entire community is at stake." Early community leaders, such as Reverend Samuel Carter, addressed the protesters, "We cannot remain silent in the face of injustice. Today it is Marcus Jefferson, but tomorrow it could be anyone. Let us remain united and peaceful, but firm in our demand for justice." As the day progressed, the scale of popular support became undeniable. Social media, protests, and the media formed a combined movement, amplifying every detail of the injustice and putting enormous pressure on the authorities. This massive support signaled that Marcus Jefferson's wrongful arrest would have national repercussions, and that a political and judicial response would be inevitable. In the relative calm of the police vehicle, Marcus closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. He knew the fight had just begun, and that this wave of popular solidarity would play a decisive role in the fight for justice. No sooner had Marcus Jefferson been released on bail than his legal team began plotting a strategy to sue Officer Ryan Callahan and the police. Every detail of the arrest had been recorded by journalists' cameras and bystanders' phones, providing compelling evidence of an abuse of power motivated by the color of his skin. In the Senate chambers, Marcus met with his legal team, which included civil rights specialists and administrative justice experts. Karen Lewis, his assistant, scrolled through videos and images from social media on a large screen. "Callahan's every move is documented. Witnesses are ready to testify. We have a strong case," she explained. Marcus's lead attorney, David Reynolds, spoke out, "We will be filing a formal complaint alleging wrongful arrest, abuse of power, and racial discrimination. We will also be seeking the immediate suspension of Officer Callahan and disciplinary action against him." Marcus listened attentively, taking mental notes on how to present his testimony in court. He knew that remaining calm and dignified would be crucial to showing the gravity of the injustice and its impact on the system. Every word had to be precise, every gesture controlled. Meanwhile, the media continued to follow the case, increasing pressure on the police and judicial authorities. Social media exploded with messages of support. Citizens, civil rights organizations, and even some politicians expressed their outrage and solidarity with Marcus. The legal team also prepared a strategy to counter Callahan's potential defenses, which would likely include claims that he was acting on his own judgment or had reasonable suspicion. Every video, every witness statement, and every administrative document would be used to demonstrate that the arrest had no legal basis. Marcus knew this legal battle would be about more than just a personal victory. "If we succeed, it will send a clear message: no abuse of power will go unpunished, and justice must be equal for all," he told his lawyers. The first hearings were quickly scheduled. The tension was palpable in the courtroom, which Marcus entered with the same dignity that had accompanied him throughout the public humiliation. Every glance, every whisper, every camera pointed at him was a reminder of the importance of his position and the symbolic weight of this case. Thus began the legal battle, a strategic and methodical one, in which every document, every piece of evidence, and every word spoken could contribute to overturning an abuse of power and defending not only the dignity of Marcus Jefferson, but that of all citizens facing injustice. As the legal battle intensified, Marcus Jefferson's team began digging into Officer Ryan Callahan's past. Internal records and prior complaints quickly surfaced, revealing a disturbing pattern of abuse of power and racial discrimination. Callahan had already been involved in several cases where black citizens had been arrested or intimidated without just cause. Some complaints had been ignored or downplayed, allowing the officer to continue his authoritarian tactics. Each document consulted strengthened the resolve of Marcus and his lawyers. At a press conference organized by the legal team, Marcus spoke before a crowd of reporters and cameras. "This isn't just about my arrest," he said in a firm, controlled voice. "This is about the abuse of power and systemic racism that has plagued our society for far too long. Officer Callahan isn't acting in isolation, his behavior is symptomatic of a deeper problem within our policing system." The media quickly picked up on the revelations. Journalists uncovered Callahan's past disciplinary records, citizen complaints, and anonymous testimonies from other officers denouncing his arrogance and prejudice. Public opinion began to denounce the institutional tolerance of clearly abusive behavior. At the same time, Marcus's colleagues and several elected officials began calling for a formal investigation into Callahan's conduct and police oversight. Letters were sent to the Attorney General and the Department of Justice, demanding immediate sanctions and reforms. For Marcus, these revelations were both a victory and a reminder of the seriousness of the fight. What we have uncovered today shows that this case is not an isolated incident, he explained to his lawyers. It exposes a system that allows some to abuse their power without fear of consequences. We must continue to the end, for me, but especially for all those who silently suffer these injustices. Agent Callahan, for his part, found himself under media and legal crossfire. His arrogance gave way to nervousness, his lawyers tried to limit the damage, but public pressure and accumulating evidence made his defense increasingly fragile. That day marked a turning point. The Marcus Jefferson case was no longer just about a humiliated senator, but a national symbol of the fight against institutional racism and the abuse of power. And the entire country began to watch closely, waiting for justice to be done. On the morning of the trial, the courtroom was filled with a tense and solemn atmosphere. Reporters, protesters, and observers from across the country were present, some carrying signs in support of Marcus Jefferson. The light filtering through the tall windows seemed to accentuate every detail, every look, every expression. Marcus entered, calm and dignified, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit. His gaze scanned the room, meeting that of Officer Ryan Callahan, who displayed nervousness masked by a false air of superiority. Every step Marcus took echoed like a silent message: dignity and truth could stand up to injustice. His attorney, David Reynolds, spoke before the judge to present his case. "Your Honor, we will demonstrate that Officer Callahan arrested Senator Jefferson without any legal reason, motivated by racial bias, and in direct violation of his constitutional rights." Marcus was called to testify. Standing before the judge and the court, he calmly recounted the events of that fateful morning. Every detail was precise: Callahan's provocative behavior, the veiled insults and public contempt, the attempt to force the door open, and finally, the wrongful arrest. "I tried to remain calm and respectful," Marcus explained, his voice firm but measured. "But what happened wasn't just a personal affront. It was an abuse of power and an act of clear racial discrimination." Witnesses called to the stand, bystanders, reporters, and Senate colleagues, corroborated his statements. Videos and images captured by cell phones and cameras were presented as irrefutable evidence. Every image showed Officer Callahan acting with arrogance and contempt, ignoring the law and Marcus's authority. During his testimony, Marcus remained composed, every word delivered with dignity. The contrast between his calm demeanor and Callahan's nervous, arrogant demeanor was striking. The court, the public, and the media were captivated by this display of courage and self-control. At the end of the day, the judge announced that he would take the time to review all the evidence before rendering his decision. But in the courtrooms, murmurs of support and admiration for Marcus were heard. Social media broadcast live clips of the testimony, and public pressure on the police and Callahan reached fever pitch. On that day, Marcus Jefferson proved something fundamental: that even in the face of public humiliation and the abuse of power, dignity, courage, and truth could stand up to injustice. And that the fight for justice was more than just a personal matter, it concerned an entire nation. A few days after the courtroom confrontation, the anticipation was excruciating. The entire nation was closely following the trial, and every media outlet was relaying rumors and analyses. In the courtroom, a palpable tension hung as the judge entered to announce his decision. Marcus Jefferson, always calm and dignified, sat upright, his hands clasped in his lap. Reporters were frantically taking notes, cameras trained on every face, capturing every detail of the moment. Ryan Callahan, meanwhile, seemed more nervous than ever, aware that the truth had been exposed and that his position was fragile. The judge spoke gravely. After reviewing all the evidence, including witness testimony, videos, and internal documents, it is clear that the arrest of Senator Marcus Jefferson was unjustified and motivated by racial bias. A murmur of relief and admiration rippled through the room. Marcus's colleagues' faces lit up, and some journalists showed small signs of emotion. The judge continued, "Officer Ryan Callahan is suspended from duty and will be subject to a thorough disciplinary investigation. His actions constitute a serious abuse of authority and a breach of professional ethics." Marcus took a deep breath. Justice had spoken, but beyond the punishment inflicted on Callahan, it was the recognition of a fundamental principle: dignity and equality cannot be flouted with impunity. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of citizens and activists gathered, cheering the decision. Protesters held signs and chanted Marcus's name. Millions of messages poured in on social media, celebrating the symbolic victory and calling for lasting change within the police force. Marcus spoke to the press, his voice firm and determined: "This victory is not just mine. It belongs to all those who have suffered injustice and discrimination. It shows that when we face injustice with courage and dignity, change is possible. But our work does not end here. We must continue to fight for real and lasting reform." Callahan, now under investigation and largely discredited, left the courtroom in a heavy silence, aware that his career had suffered an irreversible setback. On that day, Marcus Jefferson celebrated not just a personal victory, but a symbolic triumph of justice over arbitrariness, dignity over humiliation, and truth over discrimination. The story of his wrongful arrest became a national example, a reminder that justice can prevail when courage and perseverance are combined with truth. A few weeks after the verdict, Marcus Jefferson returned to his Senate duties with a mixture of serenity and strengthened determination. The case of his wrongful arrest had shaken the nation, but it had also inspired a surge of solidarity and mobilization for justice and equality. In his office, Marcus reflected on the magnitude of the fight he had just waged. Every meeting, every testimony, every protest had helped change the public's view of abuses of power and institutional racism. He knew that the legal victory was only one step, and that real reform would require constant commitment. With his team, Marcus began developing legislation to strengthen oversight of police actions and protect citizens from abuse. He worked closely with community leaders, legal experts, and fellow elected officials, transforming his own experience into a tool for lasting change. The ever-present grassroots support manifested itself in the form of citizen forums, educational campaigns, and civil rights awareness programs. Marcus actively participated in these initiatives, using his voice and story to inspire and mobilize. Despite the challenges and criticism, he remained undaunted. The dignity and resilience he had demonstrated in the face of humiliation and injustice continued to guide his every action. Young people, in particular, saw in him a living example of courage and perseverance, proving that even in the face of unjust systems, it is possible to stand up for one's rights and transform pain into strength. At a ceremony organized by civil rights groups, Marcus spoke to an emotional crowd: "The injustice I suffered was not just personal. It represented a reality that many live every day. But together, we can change that reality. We can create a future where dignity, respect, and justice are not privileges, but rights for all." The applause rang out, heartfelt and powerful. Marcus knew his fight had already left an indelible mark. The story of his arrest, his resilience, and his victory would become a national symbol of justice and hope. And as he left the stage, surrounded by smiles and admiring glances, Marcus Jefferson understood that the true victory lay not only in the court's verdict, but in the lasting impact it left on society, a legacy of courage, dignity, and determination in the face of injustice.